If we're going to do this, we have to find a way to codify how you move from moment to moment. How do you look at it? How do you explore it? And this is where the idea of triggers, what I call triggers, came from. And what was fascinating is that as I started to explore it, what I realized very quickly is that the mechanics of human interaction, the mechanics of it, are actually remarkably simple. Another thing became incredibly clear to me. There is only about 15% to 20% of any text that you actually need to drill, even if you're working in a drilling kind of way. If I say something to Anastasia, if I say, how are you doing, Anastasia?
Great.
Great, I'm fine, thank you. Okay, what's just happened in that interaction? That's 3 moments, right? Actually, it's 4. It's, Anastasia, how are you?
Great.
Great. You. So great, period. You, that's 2 thoughts, right? The first thought is her response to what I said. The second thought is, oh, he asked me why I did, how I am. I should ask him back, because I'm basically a polite person. If, and this is also a really wonderful part of this, you begin to understand character. If I said, how are you, Anastasia, and you just said, great.
Great.
Good, then I'm dealing with a narcissist. So Anastasia is going, huh, that's interesting. Why don't I say, how are you? Oh, I'm a narcissist. What?
Maybe she just doesn't want to know how.
Or she doesn't want to know who I am. Or she hates my guts. Okay, right, yeah. All right, so whatever it is, there's a reason why there isn't that other response. But let's assume that there is a natural introductory response, and it's great. How are you? And I say, I'm fine. Why do you have to drill that? If I know that I want to know how she is, and I go, Anastasia, how are you? And she knows that she's feeling good, and she understands why she uses the word great, and that she's a generous person and polite, and so she asks me back. You don't have to drill this, you just have to understand the dynamic. Not only that, what you've begun to discover is something totally ludicrous, but wonderful. Which is that inside each moment, there is a world. And there is a world of understanding inside each moment. You all do it if you've done Shakespeare. Part of what I'm asking you to do is to begin to look at contemporary interaction in the same way that Shakespeare, with the way you look at Shakespeare. You can't play Shakespeare unless you understand what's happening in every single moment, right? You can't play it. I'm asking you to bring the same rigor to this, but to see it as something that is delightful and extraordinary, that inside the word great, there is an amazing number of possibilities. All the other things that she could have said, and the reason why she says great, and the reason why she says, how are you? It seems completely simple. But if you understand it, your connection to it becomes much more effortless. Does this make sense? Interestingly enough, when I began to really start to try and break this down of why people, the mechanics of why people express when they express themselves, I actually found, as I said, it was very simple, that it breaks down essentially into 4 major ways of expressing. The first is that you say or do something, and it's not just expressing, by the way, is not just verbal, I'm also talking about physical, right? You know, if I come over and I kick Anastasia, right? It's unlikely that her response is going to be great, or if it is, she's really sarcastic. But if I kicked her, what are you going to say? Ow! Or why the hell did you do that? Or what are you doing? Or whatever the response is, right? So this is not just what you say to each other, it is also what you do to each other. So you say or do something in response to something that somebody else has just said or done. In a comedy, that is probably about 80% of the interaction, if not 85. in a drama, it drops down a few points. But if you think about it, you respond to something that the other person has said or done immediately. It's an immediate response. Why would you have to learn it if you understand why the other person said it and why you respond in the way you respond? I'm leading you away very gently from needing to drill or sit in your car. How many of you do this? This is the one that always used to kill me. How many of you lay the other person's lines down on a tape and then leave and then say yours silently, or on your iPod and say yours silently, leaving the requisite amount of space, and then out loud say the other person's words, and as you're driving you run, and it's what I always used to love about that is I'd always know which actors would come into my rehearsal process having done that, because there would be this kind of intense tension because they're desperately trying to get, when they don't really know exactly what they're saying, they're still trying to get it in this little window that they've created for themselves. The second kind of trigger, so that's the first kind of trigger. Does that make sense? The second kind of trigger is you say or do something because of what you have just said or done in the immediately preceding moment. And the immediately preceding is crucial. So a monologue, most of the time, is actually a series of moments where you are responding to what you've just said. Yeah? Okay. Those are the two main ways you interact with the other characters that you play with. The third type of trigger is you say or do something because of something that somebody else said or did prior to the immediately preceding moment. And you want to know something? This is why people drill their lines. When you go back and you respond to something that was actually said 4 or 5 lines ago, that's harder, isn't it? That's why people drill. You're actually drilling everything in order to capture 10 to 15% of the text. So what would be something that is prior to the immediately preceding moment? I'm sorry I kicked you, by the way.
Yes.
Twice. So if this was a scene, how the hell would I learn that? Right? That's a case of the fourth type of trigger. I'm responding to something that I said or did. If I'm talking and Anastasia suddenly interrupts and go, just a second, Richard, why did you kick me? Then that's she responding to something that was said earlier. How you get to either of those states, is this clear to everybody? How you get to either of those states is Anastasia, one of the things Anastasia has to work out is, am I sinking into subtext here? Which we will talk about in a minute. Am I sinking into a state where actually the only thing I'm thinking about is Anastasia is in class with me, by the way. Why is my teacher, why did he pick me to kick? You could create a whole endless subtext for yourself with this, right? Yeah. Okay, so there you are with that, and you're doing that. Or you have to work out something that happens that triggers you referring back to that immediately, to that moment that was 3 or 4 minutes ago. Does that make sense? Yeah. So what you have to do is you have to work out the why. Always look for the why. And don't learn something until you know the why. How many of you, if you've done a shoot or you've done a play, and you've woken up 2 years afterwards in the middle of the night. And I have to take my glasses off for this, because this used to be my action. I'd wake up and I'd go, shit! If only I had understood that moment, which I have just realized in my sleep 2 years after I played the role. If only I had understood that moment, I would have known so much more about how to play that character. How many of you have had that experience on some form or another? Yeah. Okay. This is a problem, isn't it? Because what you did was you learned the line without knowing why you said it. You expressed the thought without understanding why you had the thought. With this way of working, hopefully you will begin to avoid that.